Hello, everybody. Good to see you all. As Phil said, I see my mom and dad are waving. That's really nice. Nice to see you all through the Zoom, I guess. As Phil said, I've been working on the Questa Ranger District since 1993, seasonal for a long time and then permanent. But a lot of that time I got to spend in the Vidal, not as much time as I wanted to because it's a little remote for us from Questa. It takes about an hour and a half one way, to get where we're working usually. So can make it hard to get up there. Recently we were doing prescribed burns, so we got up there. And also this summer, Cassie Keys and Lisa Thompson did a really great job on a survey up in the Powder House area, as we call it. So we'll be showing some of the artifacts and things that they found, as well as some of the historical things that are going on in the Valle Vidal. So it's gorgeous there, as you can see from this. That's just a random day going there, and you get gorgeous photos just about whenever you go. Let's get oriented. Can we get ahead? Thought I could. Can't use my cursor. All of a sudden, there's like this pop-up that came that I can't get to go away. Do you know, Phil, anything?
You can
Just can't use my mouse.
You can use the arrows on your keyboard, I think, to just forward the screen if you need.
I know it stopped. Oh, there it goes. Thanks. Got it. I have this pop-up that's kind of. I think I can see well enough here. So let's get oriented here on where the Valle Vidal is. It's truly the inner mountain area of the Sangres. If you start on the upper left, you see Costilla, and the Colorado border is right at the top there. Questa south of Costilla. And you have Red River and all that going in there. It's a little bit of a faint map, but it's one of the better ones showing the topography, I think. So to the south, if you look, you've got Eagle Nest Lake and Moreno Valley. And to the east, at the very bottom, right corner, you have Cimarron, and Wild West town of Cimarron, right off of the Santa Fe Trail. That's a pretty key here. So it's right, pretty much right there in the middle. If you look at the blue line there, that's what's known as the divide of the waters, and it's been known historically as that. And we call it the west side and east side of the Valle Vidal. And let me just tell you a little bit about the topography. I wrote it down up here. The highest point is Little Costilla Peak, 12,000 feet. It's the divide between two distinct geographical areas separated by the Culebra, Cimarron, and Taos ranges of the Sangre de Cristo. The east side of the divide has the grassland plains to the east, and the waters from the Poniel, Bermejo, and Cimarron creeks drain into the Canadian watershed, which is a division of the Arkansas, which eventually flows into the Mississippi. On the western side, the waters from Costilla Creek and Comanche Creek drain into the Rio Grande Valley watershed to the west. So that's kind of where we're located. You've got really mountainous terrain pretty much on the west side, and also some pretty big, large valley areas. And on the east side, got some mountains, but it goes into these, they call them parks, really wide meadow areas. Kind of all of these have a lot of waters and stuff in them. Let me go to the next. So that's where we're situated. You have the Santa Fe Trail coming in from the east, and it kind of ended right there, and it was difficult to get through the mountains, either from the west or the east, because that is where the Hickory Apache and the Ute were living. And here's just an example. We're going to start on the west side, as if we're coming in from Costilla. On the map, it's we call it Forest Road 1950, and it's also County Road 196, I believe, on the maps. Just to let you know, that road, it's showing up on Google Maps as a road that's easy to drive, and it's actually not open in the winter or anything like that. It's really washboardy. It looks like you can take a passenger car, but you might not be able to drive it all the way to Cimarron once you get through the mountains, because it might shake it apart. So just to let you know, it's a nice road that goes through there, but it's not passable in winter at all. So coming in from the west, we come to the Costilla Creek and Comanche Creek area. And this is the Powder House area where Cassie and Lisa were working last summer. And this is just an example of the kind of stuff they were finding, the kind of high elevation sites. It hadn't really been surveyed this part ever before, so it was really great to get them in there. A couple of summers ago, Taos Arc Society and I think Site Watch folks and some other Carson archaeologists did a little bit of survey in the area. But this was really typical, I guess, of the material they were finding. I think we called this, I didn't write it on there, but opalite is what we were calling that. We found quite a bit in this middle archaic period. I'll go on to the next one. Kind of similar type of a site, and eroding flakes, lithic flakes eroding, staying maybe a hearth. And like those other points I showed before, these also have similar ones here that they dated to also the Middle Archaic, the Moquino San Rafael type points. And this is the material we find all over. You know, the previous picture showed the, you know, we were calling it white chert before, but I think it's opalite officially. And quite a bit of that material is up there, and as well as this dacite material that you find all over the place on the Questa Ranger District. There's several lava flows that this had come from. So very nice artifacts still out there. So, you know, also on the west side that we're talking about, as you go up towards, turn to the north, towards Costilla Reservoir, there's a reservoir up there. Along in there, there's a rock shelter site along the way that Taos Archaeological Society and Site Watch and a few other folks did excavations testing on with Price Heiner, who was the archaeologist at the time. And that was quite interesting. They went through quite deep in there and just were able to find material that showed use of the rock shelter as maybe a shelter for traveling. You know, if you go up through that area, you get towards oh, not Fort Garland, but anyway, there's more passes and things to the north. So it would make sense people are going to that Costilla Creek area. So let's talk a little bit about how this land got developed. Well, during the Mexican period, and before that in the Spanish period, huge land grants were being granted by the governments. And those were more in Taos and closer to those areas. And up here, was a Mexican land grant. You see the writing there. It's really interesting. If you look at the map also, you can see how they have already kind of surveyed it and seen what materials they could exploit. You know, they've got mining areas, there's coal mining areas. And just at first, look how huge this is. This is, I think it was 1.7 million acres, and it goes all the way from that divide that we're talking about, showed before. This is on the east side of the divide. So all that east half of the Valle Vidal is the Max, was the old Max. And so it's just a little portion of this map, kind of towards the western mid side. So you see down at the bottom, there is Cimarron and Springer. I mean, this is a huge land grant. So it went all the way out to Springer, went all the way up towards Trinidad, Raton. So it had all the coal mines and things. And so what the area that we're talking about, a lot of that was exploited for needs on the land grant. So it's really interesting, these grants that make up the Valle Vidal. One man, we'll show him in the next slide, Charles Obian, I'm going to call him, I'm not sure if that's how you say it right. He was the one who, he actually had ownership in both of these huge land grants. And one of the ways people was by marrying into Mexican families and gaining Mexican citizenship, and then they were able to petition for these land grants. And it's very interesting. You see the names Charles Guadalupe Miranda, who was the a friend, but also Mexican, is the governor of New Mexico from Mexico, and Charles Bent, who was one of the first governors, I guess. Here you see Lucine married. Let me show, I might come back to this one, but let me go to the next one too, to give a little bit about Carlos. So here's the other on the western side, because the Sangre de Cristo grant, they're about the same time. He had applied for them at the same time, Charles Obian, and he finally, these are the dates when they got them, but Charles, his nephew Stephen Lee, and his son, and they were the ones that were actually killed in the Taos Revolt in 1847. And part of that was a little bit related to them owning all of this land, and people didn't like that so much. So these grants were originally given to actually take it away. Like I had said, the inner mountains were where the Jicarilla, Apache, and Ute were living, and the Pueblo people, Taos Pueblo people, would come through there, actually passing through to the plains for buffalo hunting and the Comanche, and would come over from the plains to Taos Pueblo. They were trading at Taos Pueblo. There were also a lot of the raiding and things going on at this time. So that was done to make which I thought was pretty interesting. And then Obian was so heartbroken that his son and nephew were killed that he sold the grant in 1863 to the Colorado governor at the time. Kind of interesting. We go back to this one here. So you see Charles Obian finally died around that time too. He was heartbroken after all that had happened. So then Lucine Maxwell took over the grant with his wife, who was the daughter of Carlos. So you see how they married into families. And then let's move on here. So that's the land grant stuff. Here's one of the, when you read about the land grant, they talk about a house being one of the first ones on the land grant. And I think this is it. This is the farthest one that was in near Amalia. And I think this recently just burned and fell down within the last year or two. So that's unfortunate, but that's some of the architecture that was going on in the territorial period. The Sangre de Cristo ground, one of the main things they used that for was sheep grazing. So there were hundreds of thousands of sheep grazing in there, and some of these were taken out to California on those, yeah. So I always think that's cool when you go in and you see all those kind of trails on the side of the hillsides, and can kind of imagine all those. Someone said when the sheep were grazing there, it just looked like puffs of cotton balls all over the place. There's, you know, folks, there's more modern sheep herding. I'll talk about sheep a little bit, sheep herding a little bit more. Here's these stacked rock features that we find overlooking all the canyons pretty much. And, you know, people have thought they might be hunting blinds. You can, you know, get down behind it and see game moving. And of course, this is where, I mean, tons of elk herds, all sorts of animals, very rich area. People have also said that travelers, when we were talking about how the people were going back and forth between the plains and the Rio Grande Valley to do buffalo hunting and such, they would put a buffalo robe or buffalo hide over the top for warmth and shelter under there. And then sheep herders have said that they would use those where they would kind of gather up the lambs and make a little pen with sticks around it while they're watching the sheep during the day. And you know, sheep grazing and livestock grazing is a really big part tradition of the area, and it's also up in the Valle Vidal. That's one of the main uses still in the Valle Vidal. So it's important to people that they keep the grazing and livestock tradition alive there. Here's another kind of a rock shelter. You can't tell from the picture, but it's also, a lot of these are in kind of a semicircular shape, and just only about 2 feet high or so, and you know, can look over there. And some other ones that we have in the area, and they're just about in every canyon. We find at least 1 or 2 of these overlooking a creek or some hunting area. And sometimes you'll even find arrow projectile points and things on the other side, as if people were using them to shoot down. So that helps us to think they might be hunting blinds. But you could see that being that use being adapted over the years too. So, and a hunting blind can be used forever, basically too. So, and again, these are some of the areas that Cassie and Lisa were surveying. Here's another look of what we're talking about here. We've been talking about the west side over there on the left half of the picture. See the main road coming in, and you see these, there's 2 really large valleys that we have, Comanche Creek watershed and the Vidal Creek watershed right there. And you can see, you know, the forested areas, very heavily forested in some areas, and grassy valleys in other areas. You might be surprised to know that, you know, when the Valle Vidal was first founded or given to the Forest Service, I guess, to administer, people had the idea that it was kind of a pristine and wild area because it had been closed off for so long, but it's actually, it was private ranch, Bermejo Ranch, and so nobody had been allowed in there. But even though people hadn't been there in a long time, they had been there in the turn of the century and the first half of the 20th century, doing logging and mining, all sorts of exploitation of the land. So it's pretty interesting just that people had the idea that it was kind of a wilderness. So it's very interesting. And now it's withdrawn from, you know, the Forest Service put it under, you know, it's under special laws for mineral. You can't do mining there anymore. And there's coal there. And that was one of the issues earlier was people wanting to do strip mining, coal mining, because there's some coal in there. And so there was a big process to get that removed from mining. Kind of interesting. Let's see. Part of the Valle Vidal, let me just go back to the map here. On the, I wish I had a pointer, I can't quite point to it, but on the west side, and that lower part of the west side, that's where you're getting into what was known as La Belle. I don't know if people have heard of that town. It was an actual mining town. This is kind of overlooking at it, but actually that whole western side on the Sangre de Cristo grant was part of what was known as the Keystone Mining District. And if you look at the map at the time, there's not a single inch that's not a mining claim. It's mining claims back to back, side to side, all over that western side of the Valle Vidal. And not a lot of money was made. That's the kind of story of the gold rush in northern New Mexico, is that it was a bust and people didn't really make anything, even though they tried it up in these really high mountain areas. You know, you can imagine, like I said, even the main road we have isn't open in the winter time. And apparently a lot of the prospecting was done in the winter time up here. It was kind of year round. And sometimes they would probably be stuck up there because you can't get down with all the mud and everything. So here we're kind of overlooking right towards La Belle. La Belle's right over the first little hill. You can see some of the old, some of those lines that are on the hillside, or some of the old placer ditches for running water for the prospecting they were doing. And some of the lines are from the old wagon roads that were in the area. And so La Belle was this is pretty amazing. La Belle was founded about in 1892. All the records of it were with the Sangre de Cristo grant, and whatever building they had, I guess it had burnt down. I don't know when it was, so there's really not a lot of records left of those mining claims, but there's some really good stuff. And this is one of the coolest things, was from their advertisement trying to get people, investors, to invest in these gold fields of La Belle. And where we are talking about is on the right side of the map. That's the La Belle area that you might be interested to know that down kind of the middle of it is the mountain range, where on the other side of it is just the area up Cabresto Canyon in north of Questa, that if you run all the way to the end of it, Midnight Meadows and all that, that's that area. So they were both around at the same time. But if you look at the right side is La Belle, and you can see all the really cool things. It had a stage line, and it even had a telephone line. For these town sites, they actually did surveys on them and brought in graders and set up those roads. So those roads were actually set up on the ground out there. Little cabin remains were in all the places that are shown. You can see some of the names of the different lode mines that are on the hillside, on the mountains. There is the La Belle Wagon Road, which goes over that ridge and down into the towns of Anchor and Midnight. And this was, I guess they got the wagon road maybe finished in, I think it was like 1895 or so, in 96. And I guess they shared a lot of the equipment and things from La Belle over to Midnight. Once things were used up on one side, they'd haul them over, and they hauled them, you know, with freight wagons, huge steam engines and boilers. And, you know, there's stories of everything they went through to do the mining out here. And La Belle, a lot of the equipment and even the two-story hotel was hauled in from Elizabethtown in the Moreno Valley, which is kind of interesting. So some of that stuff came all the way from there. And then that was even moved to other locations. It was common to move the equipment to the next place, especially when it was a bust. Like LaBelle really didn't have, you know, all of these places had like a really good first season or two when they thought they were going to get something. They actually built all these cabins and everything. There was a sawmill for Comanche Creek. You can kind of see that at the top, middle top up there. That's Comanche Creek sawmill. And that was supposedly working 24/7, milling all the wood for building the houses in LaBelle and mine props and things like that. So it was a very busy little area. And now Comanche Creek sawmill, I haven't seen pictures of it when I was there, but there's hardly a trace of it anymore. Depending on what time of year you go and how high the grass is, you can't really see that, but it's had a, you know, large sawmill in there. And as you go up that little draw, there's actually some cabins up in there that people lived in, I guess, that were working at the mill. And there's little claims all over, and some of the cabins, outlying cabins that are found around or next to a little mining claim. Pretty cool. Here's some more scenes of LaBelle, and I couldn't find, there is a couple of pictures of the town when it was there, but I could not find it in time to load it onto here. But there's a modern building there that an outfitter has built. There had been another earlier cabin there, but it had gotten burned down. But none of them were the real LaBelle buildings. I think on the map it used to say LaBelle Lodge, but that was talking about the modern building. But when I was walking around on the hillside, you can see where those old roads were. They're graded and everything in there. And apparently the story with LaBelle is one of the later owners of Bermejo Ranch, supposedly, had, I guess a lot of the buildings had burnt and there were some still standing, and they were afraid of squatters coming in. Someone was afraid someone might be growing marijuana in there. I don't know if that was true. So they actually, in the 60s or 70s, somebody had bulldozed the rest of the remains that were out there. So now that it's really hard to find anything. There's one or two cabins left. There's the little one I have there. And I'm not sure if it's the LaBelle Crescent. That was the name of the newspaper. That building, the old picture is from the newspaper. One of the most valuable things is that they had a daily newspaper just about, and talking about all the claims and all the new people coming into town. And there's a book by Jim Barry Pearson. He has one about mining in Red River, and he also has some talking about LaBelle also, that he went and he read every paper and made notes on it and wrote a whole book about it. It's very cool. Here's just some of the example of some of the claims that are out there, some of the old mines. And a lot of these are the ones that are marked on that earlier Keystone mining district map. They're actually pretty true to where they are out there. You can see how all that wood is rotting by now. When I had first come working here in the 90s, a lot of it wasn't quite as rotted at all. And, you know, I had ideas that things could be restored and fixed and all, but you can see how just after 100 years, they really fall apart. It's another example. They're all different kinds, you know, some had a shaft house on top of them. Here's a really cool one with the guys at the Aztec lode. That's pretty typical little setup there where they have this is the hand whim or winch, and they've got a bucket that they're putting down there. And a lot of times a person would ride down in the bucket and do the work, and then they'd load the bucket up and bring it out. Here's kind of the setting up at LaBelle again. You can see there's the road ruts, but there's also the picture on the left, you can see some of the old ditches where they were using water to flow into the placer workings. And there's a picture, I don't have it here either, where it shows flumes and things built in some of these ditches. And in the advertisement for the goldfields up La Belle, they say things like unlimited hydropower and unlimited timber for mining props. And it's got a pictures of one, must have been when the creek was really high, it's showing rushing water and saying turbines can run with this water. It's pretty interesting how they used to advertise trying to get investors. All right, still on the west side of the Valle, down in the southern part of Comanche Creek area is what is called Clayton Cabin. And I'm not sure where the name exactly came from. If people know some history on that, that would be really interesting. It's one of the places did a stabilization. The Philmont, we do quite a few projects with the Philmont as one of our main volunteers. And they actually were their backcountry, considered the Philmont backcountry. And there's, I think in the last couple of years, they used to only have about 4,000 hikers. And now I think they're up to like 9,000 hikers that go through, and they use some of the facilities on the Valle and also camp out. And on the Philmont, they've got a whole mining district themselves where they've done a lot of reconstruction, even reconstructing a narrow gauge railroad and everything. So we were really lucky to have them come, and this was really falling apart quite a bit. It was probably built in the 1920s, and it could be associated even with William Bartlett, that was one of the early owners of Bermejo Ranch. Very interesting. It had a little porch on the front that was falling off, so we had to take that off. But they did really nice work. That prop, that whole floor was falling in. They did some really nice work on it. The up at the top, the chimney was widening out, and they were able to bring that in. So they did really great work out there. This had been used game and fish and different specialists. There's kind of a backcountry lodge that was used by the Forest Service and other folks, and Bermejo Ranch. Now we're getting to the divide of the waters, that middle part, right in the middle of the Valle Vidal. And it's interesting, that's right where the land grant boundaries are between the Sangre de Cristo and Maxwell land grant, and also the Taos County and Colfax County line. And also, speaking of the traditional grazing that goes on, that's the divide when the first half of the year, summer, the cattle, livestock are on the east. Is that how it goes? East side of the Valle Vidal, I think. Might have it wrong. And then halfway through, they switch and bring them up. It's called Clayton Corrals. You see it on the side of the road, halfway through the Valle there. They gather them up, and then they transport them. I guess this is at the end, so this is on the later part of the year when they're gathering them, and then they take them home. This is at the end of the year, but they're out all summer. The Valle Vidal Grazing Association is who that is. Longtime partners also. We do a lot of work with them on the range and with fences and corrals in the waters, and they have cowboys that ride all over all the time, so they're able to report back to us when things are, what's going on out there. So wanted to talk a little bit about the east side of the Valle Vidal. There are a lot of some of the artifacts are real similar to what was found on the west side, showing the same people traveling through. It seemed more that the Hickory, Apache, and Ute were more on that west side. And we found occasional pieces of the pottery, just not as many things. I think having just so many people hiking through over the years, a lot of artifacts have been picked up and lost in fires. The thing on the right is, I don't unfortunately know what it's called, but it was used like a chair. You would hang it on a branch or something and then could fold it a little bit and make it a little chair. There's kind of a picture on the very bottom of that right-hand picture that shows a little bit, but anyway, it was the way to set up a chair that I thought was really cool. Let's see, I'm going to read a passage while that's on, so get out of here. Let's see. Bear with me a second. Okay, I'm going to read a little bit of this here, just to show you what was going on in there. In 1862, the US government negotiated a 25-year lease of 1,200 acres in the Poniel Canyon north of Cimarron with Lucien Maxwell at an annual rental fee of $20. The acreage in Poniel Canyon was reportedly used to teach Ute and Apache children how to farm. Maxwell kept thousands of acres under cultivation and built the 3-story Aztec grist mill in Cimarron in 1864 to grind the wheat and corn harvested from his sharecropper fields in Poniel Park, which he then provided to the Indian Agency at Cimarron and the military at Fort Union. Part of it that is that Kit Carson was involved in all this. He was a cohort of Lucien Maxwell, and they were able to bring some forts in the area in the 1850s. Here's something. See if I can. Okay, here's something really interesting, is that in 1866, Kit Carson and the other Indian agents urged the US government to purchase the Maxwell grant lands at 16 cents an acre for the Jicarilla and Ute, because they considered that the land of the Jicarilla, Apache, and Ute, they were actually at Valle Vidal area, that eastern side to them, which I thought, wow, that's really, really interesting. But just the next year after they came up with that idea is when they struck gold in the Moreno Valley on Baldy Mountain, just south of there, which was also on the Maxwell land grant, and that brought in, so many prospectors to the land that really pushed the Jicarilla, Apache, and Ute. They had been pasturing their livestock, and the Moreno Valley was I think they even called it Ute Valley at one time. So yeah, they decided not to do that, and that's where Elizabethtown is there too, and it was being incorporated as the first town in New Mexico in 1868. And by then, many of the Ute bands had left for reservations in southern Colorado or the agency at Ute Park. The Navajo and Apache to the reservation at Bosque Redondo at Fort Sumner. Land surveys completed by the General Land Office in 1870 showed that many of the native people had already moved out of the area. With the hunting grounds overhunted and pasture lands overgrazed due to the newcomers, the Jicarilla faced starvation and sickness at Maxwell Ranch until they were moved to other reservations in 1872 and then 1887. The agency at Cimarron officially closed in 1876. And American settlement and development in New Mexico in this Intermountain area, Red River and places like that, increased rapidly after the final removal of indigenous people to reservations in 1890. And so that's why I think a lot of things you'll see Red River and different towns being founded in 1892 and 93 and 95. And here of some of the exploitation that went on for something that seems kind of like wild area. It's pretty extensive. So you see on the west side is where La Belle is. There were a few sawmills, some of the old roads, but mostly there was a lot of that jammer logging in the 1940s through 1960s. So there's all of these series of roads in there that you wouldn't believe, just really well-built roads that they did just to do the logging in there. On the east side is more where the historic logging of Punil Park by the Maxwell Land Grant. And you can see on there what facilitated their logging was a logging railroad that was operating about 1910 to the 1920 or so. So that came from Cimarron. We'll talk a little more. So that was one of the big goals of people, the owners of the Maxwell Land Grant. It became the Maxwell Land and Railway Company, was to build a railway and get the timber out for use as mine props for the Continental Thai Company for the mines, coal mines in the Raton area, I believe. So all of the logs and things were taken down to Cimarron by train and then transported to the other place. You can see there's a number of sawmills on there, the little brown squares. So in service to the logging, they would, and sometimes they built entire large settlements around logging place. Some were just really small little sawmills, but most of even families, a lot of the logging was done in kind of individual contracts with people. And so you'll find, there's some different homesteads and things out there that are associated with that. And then earlier, before the logging came in, just when the land grant was more in operation, when they, after the Homestead Act in 1860 and Maxwell inviting people in after 1865 or so, people came and they were allowed, they were kind of like sharecroppers where they were allowed to pay Maxwell in some of the grain and things that they were growing. It became a problem later when the railway company took over and wanted to get everyone off the land. Here's just some of the scenes. I'm not sure what that earlier one. I went a little too fast. This is one of the things that you find that are probably going to be going away soon, are these old chimneys where the cabins burnt down around them or rotted around them. And they were made really well, that you can tell they have mud mortar, adobe mortar, and they actually, some of them had plaster on the outside of them with the adobe plaster. Some, when you go, you see the mounds of where the adobe's melted off. The one on the left is right out in the middle of the Whiteman Vega elk range. If you're going by there, you can kind of see it if you look north off the road. These are both up Crystal Creek, and that area seemed to be settled in, after the maybe 1870 or 1880s. So for the Questa District, that's pretty early times to find times. I think I didn't put some artifact pictures, but we typically find go on here, artifacts from this time period of the 1890s through the early 1900s, crockery, stoneware crockery, and soda bottles and beer bottles, a lot of the china, yellowware china, that kind of farmhouse china, and butter pans for making butter. I don't think I put any pictures in there. So I don't believe this is the houses in that earlier picture. They don't have those fireplaces on them. So there's a few places up there, and some were so burned up over the years, not just recently, but forest fires over the year destroyed, that usually sometimes there's just a little depression in the ground and the rock pile left over. Here's a couple more. Again, you can see those beautiful chimneys. You can see the really well-built log cabins. This was a pretty large one. There's also another dog trot cabin. This might have also had a sawmill up in this area as well. Would have been pretty old. Let's see. This is one of the more famous areas on the east side, on the Maxwell Grant. Timothy Ring was a Civil War veteran. I guess quite a few of the people that came out to settle on the Grant, or even just at that time, were Civil War veterans, and he happened to be one. And he and his brother had come out as young men in, I think, 1870 or so, and he first built a little cabin, and then by 1890 built a really large log cabin, had a wife, and I think he had 6 daughters living out there. You can see the picture on the left with Mason Chase had owned the Maxwell Land Grant. That it went through a series of owners, the Maxwell Land Grant, so it kind of changed over time, and they focused more on the ranching part of it. You can see the house there, and you can see it in today's time. They did a stabilization project that had fallen apart quite a bit, so they rebuilt quite a bit of it. They had an historic architect come and plan it all out and map it all out, and currently it needs some more stabilization. It's a 2-story, and that second floor is starting to cave in. So we hope to, we had been working with the Philmont on that, and they had legal issues in the last couple of years, going bankrupt, the Boy Scouts. Those people that were on the historic restoration team had gone elsewhere. So I'm not sure if when we'll be able to stabilize that. There's an interpretive trail at the campground that's really nice. It's about it's not quite a mile long to get to the house, maybe a half mile or so. And that tells the story of the Ring family and the settlement in the area. I recommend that. It's pretty neat. Here is that log house before it was built, with that second story on it, when the Ring brothers first came. And so this was probably in 1870s or so, 1880s. Pretty cool. Sip this water. Yeah, one of the main things they finally got done was this railroad, and to logging railroad, and just recommend this book, Pride and Glory. That's just came out. It really gives some really good history of an amazing history of the logging railroad. Just kind of go through these a little bit here. Here's when they were having to build the railroad. It was a standard gauge railroad, Cimarron Northwestern, and yeah, had to put the man and horsepower to it. Amazing amount of work. It was it 20 miles? I think 22 miles. Here's another picture of just the hard work and all that they had to contend with here. washouts and rock slides. That Poniel Canyon is famous for flooding. And when they talk in that book about there's all these trestles and creek crossings that they had to build out of all those timbers, that's some of the timber they were cutting. So get the timber out, they had to cut a lot of timber. But you can imagine how much work that was. And here's the logging railroad where they have it all running, the log train. And it's interesting, all of the equipment and the train, the locomotive, and everything was all secondhand equipment. They had been used elsewhere, and here it is in Poniel Park. Here's some of the scenes from Poniel Park, and Poniel Park's in North Poniel Canyon, by the way. So in the one picture on the left, you can see the little buildings and things. A lot of those, they are not there anymore. And a good shot of them after they dismantled the railroad in, I think, 1924, and we're doing truck logging out of the same mill. And here's an overall view of how extensive sawmill settlement was. Just incredible what's out there. When you go there now, there's nothing there pretty much. It's almost hard to believe that there was anything there. There's still broken dishes and bottles and scattered metal, but really everything is pretty much gone. A lot of it, what was left of it, burned up in the Poniel fire in 2002. So kind of what it looks like here now. That this is a little lower view. The one before was from a little higher up on the canyon, but this is pretty much that same setting. Let me just go back to show you what had been there before. There's really not a trace of those little buildings that are on the hillside there. There's of the sawmill in the front there, and a house. Well, here's part of the house and sawmill. This is what it looked like. Fire. It was actually, I think, 2002. But we had put some little barriers around the old buildings to keep the cattle from grazing out of them, and the dang stick fences we put up, they didn't burn, but the building inside of them burned. That's how hot it was. Is those cabins were just ready to burn after about 100 years from the heat, and it didn't even burn up those fresher pinon sticks out there. On the left, they're just rehabbing. When they did put a fire line around that little cabin, and they were just pulling the dirt back in so it didn't erode as much. But here's just some of what was left over from that town: a little fireplace, chimney base, one of the log cabins that didn't burn. And I think we counted where there were maybe 20 cabins and buildings out there that had burnt down. And so far, I haven't seen any pictures of the little ghost town before it had burnt down. It's out there that were in fire areas, especially, not much left of them, and the cabins themselves are rotting and falling apart. Here we are before the did a prescribed burn up there, went out with Jose to check the cabins, and he'd made notes on what kind of fire protection, and they ended up bringing a mower and mowing the grass around the cabins. And then I believe they lit a black line also right before they burned. But you can see how not much left at all of that town. It'd be hard to know there was anything there. Again, that same area when they were burning this back in November. There was quite a bit of grass, so it got look at it in the spring. There's still trying to see if part of that railroad grade is in the town, and we're looking for a few things like that. Working with the people that wrote the history that they've got in the book. They did LiDAR studies and were able to find train lines. So we want to go out and kind of ground proof those. Again, everything had burnt up, and look how extensive this is. The railroad first went to O'Neill Park in about 1910, and then they extended it down Sealy Canyon to Ring. And that was a really big logging town. You can see all the trees cut down on the hillsides. They would cut all the trees and then actually pick up the track from O'Neill, and they extended it another place. But here's Ring, and here's really what's left of that. Also nothing much there. Had all burnt down. You can see some of the mounts for the engine, for the sawmill. You can see a few other things. Not much is out there anymore. The huge boiler stacks are still all smashed up out there. And again, this was all, years over the years. And then the recent fire. One of the cabins didn't burn down there. We were able to put a little scratch line around it. This is just one of the typical cabins out there. It had a wood stove and then a bunch of fire brick laying around there too. This is really typical how you see how rotted the logs have gotten. Not much left to it, but it's one of the few cabins that are still out there. This is what it looked like right after the fire, and I think that was 2002, not 3, but might be a mistake there. This was the cemetery, and you can't see it too well, but the larger picture there was a little like family plot with the little rock foundation around it, and it had about 3 graves in it. And on the bottom right is actually a close-up, and I don't know if you can see it, but it was a picket fence. It had a little picket fence around it. The pickets, I don't know if you can see it, but they're kind of burned. They're laying on the ground. You can kind of make out the triangular top of those that fell over. So I don't know if you can see that, but that was right after the fire. You can see the smoke still. And then after that, all the ash blew away. It got covered over in pine needles, and kind of looks like it does in that upper right picture now, with some of the trees growing back that didn't die. But I was really glad I got to see what it looked like right after the fire. And here's some more of what it looks like. This is the kind of stuff we find left over of cabins. One is a fresh burned one on the upper right. The other ones are ones I came across that had burnt down years before. A lot of times we'll just find that rock pile, the corner chimney. You'll find, some broken dishes and glass from the turn of the century and later, 1910 and such. Very typical of, unfortunately, everything that's destroyed now. This is another bonito little cabin left, and you can see some of those cabins. They're not cabins in the back. They're actually like tent buildings and wood buildings that are up on platforms, and so not as substantial as log cabins. But look at how substantial the sawmill and everything is. That's pretty incredible for really not a sign of it being there anymore. Everything had burnt down. There's, like I said, the broken dishes and all that, but you can see this is bonito. So this was the end of the line on that Cimarron Northwestern Railway, and the trains would turn around here and go back down to Cimarron. And I didn't have a picture of Bonito, but there's another little settlement in Lookout Canyon that was probably similar, except for not having a railroad. And I put a few pictures of what that looks like now. It's probably very similar to this. That's what that looks like now. Pretty much all done. There's some ground from the loading dock or sawmill where the fire guys are out there, kind of near. Also, that was a huge building, so they're probably still maybe inside the building over there. There's a little, this is all that's left out there. But for our prescribed burn, they also, by the time they did that, the grass was all grown up, so they also did mowed around that to save those timbers. We try to save what little is left. And we've come to the end of our journey here. This is still the end of that railroad there in Poniel Park. But that was a neat picture with the women walking on the tracks, and you see the mine props and cross ties stacked there. And, you know, none of that is there anymore. The ties, some of the, right, that was a picture from 1964. There's a few sections still where some of the ties remain, but all the steel was picked up. If it was used in other railways, and some was taken for World War II. And there is not a lot of trace of that anymore up there. But I think that's it. I think that's what I had to talk about. Kind of a whirlwind tour through the Valle Vidal there.
Okay, thanks, Carrie. That was great. Great photographs. Are most of those in that new book, or?
Yeah, a lot of them are. They went and gathered those up, bless their hearts. I can't believe how many places they went to find these. And I've seen a lot of them before, and we had some of these at the Carson, but they really went out of their way to find whatever pictures, and they actually took new pictures of those areas too, which is cool. Like I did, showing nothing is there anymore.
Are a lot of those in the state archives or in Santa Fe?
I don't know that they are. You know, we should make sure they get there. I'm not sure, you know, some of these, they come from Raton and some are from the museum in Colorado.
Yeah.
But yeah, that would be good to be able to make sure we get those in there.
Of yeah, that would be great. And the mining records, are they in Santa Fe too, or?
The ones from LaBelle are not there. They had burnt up, but some from the Maxwell land grant, because he was also owned the big ditch, that big ditch, mining ditch. And so there's some records of the land grant stuff. But
yeah, because they put all those on microfilm, I guess, and all the proof of labors and whatnot.
Yeah, I've seen them for the Taos County ones. I think the ones from LaBelle, that's the stuff that got burned up. But and I haven't looked at Colfax County. You know, in Taos County, yeah, you can go into look at all the mining claims actually in the books at the county clerk's office, and
Right.
and just one claim after another, book after book of mining claims in there.
Yeah, I've spent hours there. I think
Yeah, me too.
all those
On the
books
floor
to the archives behind Pep Boys back.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I think they're all back in there now. But so yeah, does anyone else? You can go ahead and stop sharing, and we'll get our gallery back. And if anyone has any questions for Carrie, you can just chime in. I think go ahead and turn on your mic.
Am I sharing anymore or no?
Yeah, you can just you
Oh, I got it.
go to the green
Yeah.
one. Yeah, stop share. There you go.
Got it.
Yeah, what a crowd.
There you go. Yeah, thanks for coming, everybody.
Yeah, really good turnout. Thanks, everybody. I was wondering about the nationalities of these people that came up. Were they, you mentioned they were Civil War veterans, but were they like from certain countries like Elizabethtown, you know, Ireland, and those people were like from all over the.
Yeah, there were a few. Yeah, at that time, you know, it was kind of the folks, the same folks that were settling the American West. And so, yeah, Ireland, a lot from Italy, Ireland, England, a lot of Americans that were, you know, since it was a little later that became part of America. You know, as a lot of people had already come and then kind of rushed the area, but there were also the Hispanic farmers, and you know, a lot of people settled on both of the land grants, and were removed when the people sold the land grant. So a lot of those are the people that got kicked off, and they had that Colfax County War, I think in 1888 or so, where they were getting the final people. They called them squatters, but they had earlier had permission to be there. But one of the owners, I think it was Bartlett, wouldn't take over the property, give the money for the property unless they ensured they had removed everybody from it. So at that time, all those cabins were abandoned. Some were even, they said it, even in the day, people had burnt them down to keep the company from owning cabins.
Yeah, and all the mining was gold, huh? Pretty much they were like placer gold or.
Yeah, I think it was, yeah, gold mining. Definitely. Maybe some silver mining too.
Were there some shafts there, or were they just adits, or how were they doing it? Or just prospects?
All of those. Yeah, they weren't real deep shafts. You know, I don't know if you could see how gravelly kind of the soil was in some of those pictures. A lot of cave-ins and things. So, and I saw someone had mentioned that Elizabethtown person was from Austria. They had looked up. So yeah, there were quite a few people from Austria. Actually, the Rich brothers, who were also had been part owners of the land grant or ring ranch at one time. Yeah, they were from Austria, and they were a pretty big part of the history of the Valle Vidal.
Yeah, there was that big mining accident, right? And over at Elizabethtown or close nearby, where like 100 people died, or there was a bad one. Yeah, and all of those.
Oh, and Dawson.
Yeah, right, Dawson, exactly.
Yeah, I think that was Dawson. Yeah.
But those
tragedy, yeah.
People were European, yeah. I guess they all were at one time. No surprise.
Yeah, yeah, they have a pretty extensive cemetery at Dawson that you can go through the cemetery there still.
Right. Anyone else have any questions for Carrie? That was really good. Learned a lot about that.
Good.
Excellent.
Awesome.
All right. Well, this will be recorded on YouTube. If you missed part of it, should be on there by tomorrow or so. If you missed the first part, I know some people came in late. So next week, next month, Cassandra Keys will be talking to us about our survey project we had last summer out at the Newman Dome and the Daysite site, and what all was found out there. And just so you know, we'll be surveying out there again, we're planning at the end of September, or at the end of August or in September, when it cools off a little bit. And so you can do a little training with GPS and join our crew out there if you want to. We'll be getting in touch with you back about that in the summer. And it's pretty levelish walking out there, you know, a lot of sage, but pretty level. Good experience for recording with BLM and Carrie and Cassandra. And you're welcome too, Carrie. Come on out and survey with us. But anyways, that'll be on January 11th. And then February 21st, I should tell you, it's not going to be the second week, but February 21st, Hayward Franklin's going to talk to us about ceramics. So just so you know, always look at the website for that information. Should be up soon about those two talks. Okay, well, let me check the chat and see if anyone else has. No, they're just saying thank you. Yeah, so thanks again, Carrie. That was really good.
Yeah, thank you.
Everybody
Thanks, everybody.
enjoyed that.
Appreciate it.
Yeah. All right. Well, take care, everybody. Merry Christmas, Happy New Year. Take care, be safe, get your booster, do all those things. And we'll see you next month.
Great. Thanks, Bill. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.